Hello guys, and how are you doing? In this Mythic Plus guide series, I'm going to discuss everything you need to know about the Frost Mage. Frost is by far the most easy spec out of all three when it comes down to rotation and playstyle. The only thing we can really do to make our damage better is by switching gear sets in between boss fights and trash. Don't get me wrong, I have a blast playing Frost in those Mythic Plus keys, and it does amazing damage if you know what you're doing. The different gear sets. Like I showed you guys in the Fire Mythic Plus guide, you can make and save different gear sets through the equipment manager. I also use an add-on called OPie for switching between gear sets with just one click of a button. A link to the add-on will be available in the description. Right now you will see some examples of the different gear sets I use. As you can see, for the most part we are switching between a single target build with again Shard of the Exodar, so we can use Time Warp on every boss pull. As for trinkets, I'm using Vitality Resonator and the Pantheon trinket, but you can also use Catalyst Injector or any other trinket that I showed in my Frost Mage and Taurus guide. For the Aoe build, I'm using Suffuse instead of Shard, and as for trinkets, you can play with any of the Aoe ones, like for example Personal Decimator. You can see that I'm also playing with that tier 22 piece. The reason behind playing tier 22 piece is thanks to the 2-set bonus, which is insanely good in AoE situations, as during Frozen Orb all of your abilities will hit harder, and Frozen Orb lines up perfectly with Vitality Resonator, as they both have a minute cooldown. Shouldn't you have a high Warforged tier 22 piece, that's fine, just play with the tier 21 4 piece. Some handy tips and tricks. Shouldn't you have noticed yet, as a mage we can time warp on every boss within the dungeon, thanks to swapping in and out shard on every boss pull. I will also link a handy weak aura that will tell you if it's safe to use Time Warp for your teammates, and if you can also benefit from someone else's Bloodlust. Again, using drums from the auction house can be really good on a tyrannical affix, so you can benefit from Bloodlust 2 times. Or use drums because your teammates are crying for a Time Warp, but you were a selfish bastard and used your Time Warp on the previous boss. Next tip, when you're gear swapping and you are swapping unused items like Vitality Resonator, they'll have a 30-second cooldown before you can actually use them. To counter this, you can use them on both your single target and AoE set, or take in consideration that 30-second window when you're approaching a boss within the dungeon. But if you, like me, do use Vitality Resonator for both your AoE and single target sets, then do be smart enough to assign the trinket to the same slot on both of your AoE and single target gear sets. Otherwise, like me, you will still have that 30-second cooldown. How to trigger Suffuse. As a Frost Mage, Suffuse can be triggered by using two different spells. Of course, by using an interrupt, or by using Frost Nova, because yes, Frost Nova does count as a elusive control effect. And if you're smart, you take the Ice Ward talent, which gives you an extra charge of Frost Nova. Do take note that some mobs within the dungeon can be immune to your Frost Nova. When discussing playstyle and rotation, I'll show you how to execute this perfectly. Like with all the other mage specs, using spell steal to your full advantage will make a difference on those higher keys. Spell stealing, for example, Unstable Flux from a Withered Fiend in the Archway can do wonders for your damage. Of course, again, using Shimmer, Invisibility and Ice Block to mitigate hard-hitting abilities will make the healer your best friend. Even more so because as a Frost Mage, you can use Ice Block 2 times. As for consumables, you can use Seed Battered Fish Blade for some extra versatility, and again Fighter Cho to relieve some stress from your healers on certain affixes. Also, having some healing pots can be really handy. Last tip I want to give: when I'm playing Frost and Fire and I'm using spells like Blizzard or Flame Strike, I use on-target cursor macros. This really improves your gameplay, believe me. You can find them in the description, as well as other macros I couldn't live without. Different talent builds. I will only discuss the talents that are the most important ones and actually have an impact on our gameplay. To be honest, the only talents that we can play around with are the tier 90 talents. You can, for example, switch from Arctic Gale to Unstable Magic if you are doing Upper Karazhan with the Tyrannical affix. This is just an example, as boss damage here is more important, and Splitting Ice will already give you a decent amount of AoE damage on the trash. Thanks to those Fingers of Frost procs, Frost is also a nice addition for target swapping on affixes with Explosive. Like I told you guys in the handy tips and tricks section of the video, you can trigger Suffuse by using Frost Nova. So if you're smart, you take the Ice Ward talent, which gives you an extra Frost Nova charge. And I guess that's everything you need to know when it comes down to talents. Finally, Playstyle and Rotation. Frost might not be the go-to spec for most mages that play high keys, and I must admit I myself don't play it all that much in Mythic Plus. Nevertheless, I was really surprised of how good it actually performs. Thanks to its simplistic gameplay, it's quite easy to pull some nice numbers, and if you do a tiny bit of min-maxing, you will see some amazing DPS. Like in all my Mythic Plus guide videos, I'll show you guys different pieces of footage, and I'll comment on the most common situations you'll face in a Mythic Plus. On this first pack in the Therian's Lair, I'll show you the Aoe Rotation by triggering Suffuse with using Frost Nova, followed by Icy Veins, Frozen Orb, using that Instant Blizzard and firing off those Fingers of Frost procs. Make sure to use that second Blizzard. In some time your Frozen Orb should come off cooldown, and it's the same rotation as at the beginning, using your Frozen Orb with Instant Blizzards and firing off those Fingers of Frost procs, of course without Icy Veins. On this pack I demonstrate how you can do insane damage by activating Suffuse with Counterspell, Icy Veins, Frostbolt into that Brain Freeze proc, followed by an Ice Lance, using that Frozen Orb when that's off cooldown, followed by that Instant Blizzard, and finally throwing your Fingers of Frost procs at the target. In this scenario I switch to my single target gear, where I play with the tier 22 piece and tier 21 4 piece. The rotation looks a little different when we are playing with that tier 22 piece because of how Frozen Orb works as a damage booster. Again, shouldn't you have any tier 22 pieces, that is completely fine. Then you simply execute the normal rotation. Starting on the first boss in the Therian's Lair with a pre-pot, precasting Frostbolt followed by an Icy Veins, Frozen Orb and Even Bolt, followed by the normal rotation. If there is a fight with some sort of adds like this one, I throw in that Instant Blizzard and use those Fingers of Frost and Brain Freeze procs as they occur. Shouldn't you be familiar with the different openers depending on your tier set combinations, then go check out my Thermal, Void and Taurus guide. A link should be popping up right now. That is basically everything about the Frost Mage in Mythic Plus. I will give you guys a quick recap. When on the trash we play the gear set I showed you with Suffuse. Remember, you can trigger Suffuse by using Frost Nova. Aoe Rotation is Frozen Orb, Instant Blizzard, use those Fingers of Frost procs, second Instant Blizzard and repeat. For the boss fights you want to switch over to your single target build with Shard of the Exodar. Be sure that your Icy Veins is off cooldown and execute that single target rotation. That's all for this video guys, let me know what you think in the comments section down below. Like this video if you liked it and don't forget to subscribe. Should you have any questions, I'll try to answer them as soon as possible. Don't forget to check out my live streams on Twitch, all of the links you need are in the description. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you next time.